Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining in. We're just going to get started in a couple of minutes maximum because we're expecting a few more people to join in. Thanks for your patience. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on a Saturday morning. My name is Anirudh Bose. This is FinEdge, and I have with me my colleague Vishakha Kapoor, who is an AVP and Wealth Manager here at FinEdge. I'd like to thank you all once again for joining in this session. It's wonderful to have you all here. We're going to dive right in since your time is precious. So, today's session is titled Secrets of Wealth Creation. And I think it's a very relevant, very pertinent one. And I do hope you find it useful and at least leave this session at the end of an hour with a few very important, if not very simple takeaways from this session. So, without further ado, let me tell you what the agenda of this session is. It's not to give you some kind of extremely technical knowledge on how some secret formula for making extremely high market beating returns. Rather, you will find some of these concepts rather simple. You may have heard of many of these concepts before, but there is a wide gap between actually knowing and doing. And the purpose of this session is to probably help you bridge that gap, to help you understand where you may be going wrong in your pursuit of creating wealth. Now, we all want to create wealth for some reason or the other. Some of us aspire just to have a lot of money in the bank. Some of us want to use that money for certain specific goals and objectives. But the one thing common in all of us is we aspire to create wealth. Now, when people come to me and say, "You're a financial advisor, how do I create wealth? How do I get rich?" I say there are basically two ways of creating wealth in your life. One, take a lot of risks, set up a business, try and win a lottery. So basically, play that whole game of uh, of, of going into risky propositions or things that may pay off with high volumes in the long run. And the other way, which is probably more tried and tested, which is something that time has proven that works, is to create wealth from our investments. So this session is on creating wealth from investments, and I believe that many of the principles that we'll cover here are things that you already know and things that just need to be understood better and enforced in your own life. And so to begin with, Vishakha, I'm going to just ask you a simple question, and you probably have an answer to that. Who is an investor according to you? Since this session is focused on creating wealth from investments, let's start with a simple definition of who an investor really is and maybe isn't.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anirudh, for the introduction. So yes, we are here to talk about wealth creation, right? I was just having a thought in my mind that why do we need to create that wealth? For example, if I get 100 rupees as an income, why can't I spend the entire 100 rupees? Why do I have to save it for future? The simple reason is future is uncertain, right? So let's say if basically if I want to save wealth for my future and who is an investor? What is the typical meaning of an investor? Simple terms, layman, I think investor is somebody who puts money into various financial assets and the purpose is to get a profit, right? But actually, what's the definition of this profit? Whether I get 5%, 6%, 7%, 20%, right? So there is no definition, right? Everybody would have different aspirations and different criteria of measuring this profit. But here at Finich, and as a financial advisor, I have been talking to a lot of investors since last 7, 8 years. What I feel a wealth or an investor is somebody who basically puts money, invest money so that he can have a better future and this particularly help him to achieve his financial goals because I believe everybody want to save money for their future and the future has it's a very broader perspective but everybody wants to have a fancy life, good standard of living. So I believe investor is somebody who basically wants to have a better future and whatever money they are saving they would be able to achieve their financial goals, right? And profitable investments are basically profit is what I would say is that you want your wealth to work for yourself, right? So basically you would want to invest your money wherein you get an inflation beating return. A lot of times we forget this a very important factor which is basically eating up your savings in the longer term, right? So I think it's a blend of lot of things. It's a blend of putting at the understanding your goals, putting your money at the in the right direction and wanting your money to basically grow wherein you get something which is better than inflation so that at least you can create some positive returns for yourself in the future.
So Vishaka, I
Now,
think one very key important point, just
yes,
to sum up I think two very key elements of what you've just brought up
yeah,
here. One, profitable investing is all about beating inflation. That's
exactly.
something that people tend to ignore.
Right,
And there is a line between saving and investing. I mean, even putting money in your piggy bank is saving. It's putting money
right.
away, right? But it's probably not achieving a profit. So I think if you have to learn to create wealth from your investments, I think the first thing that people need to understand, as you rightfully said, is you have to be willing and able to counter inflation through your investments. And I think the common habit of investors in India is to put money in risk averse kind of schemes, is something we'll cover later. So would you say that that's not really investing?
Uh, No, see, that is like I said, the definition of an investor is some, like you correctly pointed out, that you would want your investment should give you a return which can beat the inflation, right? But when we actually risk averse investments are very easy, very simple. It gives you a peace of mind. You don't have to do really anything about it. But when you actually dig deeper into those investments and you feel that you're actually, the wealth created from those investments are not helping you to create that positive returns. So I think that would anybody who's saving investments or you're putting money into different investments is an investor, but it's just that you need to put into the right direction.
So that there's a profit, a real profit.
Yes, exactly.
Great. So that
Absolutely. I
that
think that
gives,
is the
yeah,
agenda, and that I believe that is the objective for every individual investor, that to get
absolutely.
that profit, right?
I think that
Yeah.
lends some great context to the start of this discussion,
Yes,
especially since most people here, I'm sure, are interested in achieving a profit from their investments. And
absolutely.
what's holding them back? I think the Finnish perspective, as you rightfully pointed out, is slightly different. So we
Yes.
look at money not as a return generation machine, or we don't measure success by short-term returns. We like to look at money as a means to an end, a means to a better future. And what point is there any point of creating wealth, or if you're not going to use it to actually achieve a means to an end? So I think having a better future, achieving your goals, not falling prey to greed and fear, as mentioned here. That is the Finnish perspective of real investing. So, with that context, let's move forward. Let's decode the secrets of wealth creation and move on to the first one, Vishaka.
Absolutely. So we spoke about goals, right? So what exactly these financial goals are? Knowingly or unknowingly, everybody knows why they are, saving this money or investing this money for future, right? But I would just would like to point out here that these goals need to be set out, so that at least you know where you want to go and how much time you want to achieve. So the goals could be anything. It could be planning for a vacation, or you could want a good education for your child, or you want to have a very peaceful retirement, or you want to buy a expensive car. Or maybe during these times, I have come across a lot of investors who they want to create an emergency fund, considering the present situation, the uncertain times. So these are the financial goals. And in fact, even tax saving is also an objective. So I do people rush at the end of the financial year just to save their taxes, right? Why this is also an objective, it's a direction why basically you would want these financial goals to be set out. Should be understand what exactly your aspirations are. I would say you are earning, you basically are working hard, you're earning an income, you want to achieve all the aspirations that you have, you want to set out different goals, you want to give fans good education, good, achieve all the objectives. So these are the goals I would say every investor should set out what they want to actually achieve.
So from what I understand, secret one is to begin with the end in mind. Is
Exactly.
that what you're saying?
Yes.
Begin with the end in mind. Don't have an ad hoc strategy.
Right.
Actually understand what you're investing for. Don't just put away money in an ad hoc way, a little bit here, a little bit there.
Right.
Start with the end in mind and then create a roadmap.
Right, but that is also very Anirudh, not only understanding and identifying your goals. I think then it's not like I know I want to give good education to my child, but how to do that. So there's a process. I think there's I don't think, but I know, I believe that yes, there's a process to achieve this particular goals, right? So I would want you to just give some, throw some light on what exactly this process involves. Is it a very complicated thing, or is it something which is actually, easy and to understand?
You bring up two very conflicting terms here, complicated and easy.
Yes.
Okay, so the opposite of complicated is simple, the opposite of easy is difficult.
Difficult, yeah.
Understand? So it's really, really simple. That's the beauty of it. So while I always say, I said at the beginning of my presentation, there are two ways to create wealth. One is to take a lot of risks in your life, and one
Yeah.
is the investment journey. The fortunate thing is, on the investment journey, the principles are guaranteed and they are simple. So that's one thing which I've observed over the course of my the years that I've worked here. If you follow these steps, and if you're committed, you have to first have the intent. I'm assuming that all of you fine people here who've come here on a Saturday morning are definitely committed to creating wealth, which is why you've taken time out for this. So understand that one, it's really simple, it's not at all complicated, and it's guaranteed. And it is not easy. So Vishakha, to answer your question, what is simple is not necessarily
It's very
easy.
easy,
And
right?
goal planning and wealth creation is one of those peculiar things which on the face of it seem really, really simple, but actually are not very easy to accomplish. So moving right on, let's start with the 3 steps. So simply just having wishy-washy goals, throwing them out there is not enough. We have to have smart goals. Now, I won't delve into the in-depth definition of what a SMART goal is, but SMART is an acronym. So while SMART is also a word and we need to be smart in our goal planning, SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time bound. Okay. So specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time bound. Just to give you an example, I may want to say, I want a great education for my kid, or I want to retire with a ton of money. Okay. Now those are goals, but they're not specific, measurable, or realistic. So those, what happens is, we start with that goal and then they just fall by the wayside. They just vanish. They become dreams. They're not really chalked out. So, however, I want to save 50 lakhs for my kids' higher education in another 16 years through so-and-so avenue. That is a SMART goal. That's going to make sure you stay the course. That's going to make sure you stay aligned through the ups and downs. So the first step is to set up all your SMART goals. Write them on a piece of paper or an Excel sheet or get a financial plan made. But those SMART goals are the beginning. Second, I consider this super, super important. Understand risk and reward. So it's not enough to just set up my goals. Now I've decided I'm going to, let's say, and this applies to any goal in life. Let's say I want to lose weight. I need to have a plan of action. I need to diet. I need to have a workout plan. Similarly, that applies to financial fitness as well. I need to understand how. So I've got my goals. What's my avenue? What's my method? Is it enough to say, okay, I want 1 crore rupees. I'm going to achieve it through fixed deposits? Probably not going to happen, because the amount I'll have to allocate from my monthly surplus every single month may be my entire salary. because I may achieve only X amount of return, which is not going to suffice. So though I've set out my goals, unless I understand the interplay of risk and reward, which means, see, risk is there in everything. Today I step out onto the road and there's a risk of a car hitting me, right? We all take risks in our life, except the risks we take are measured. So personally, I don't think it's people should be risk averse. Many people are risk averse by nature, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should be risk averse for your investments. Because there's a famous saying, no one ever became rich by investing in a savings account. And this is
Right.
absolutely true. The important thing, Vishakha, is to understand risk, right?
Correct.
To understand it. Now, the problem doesn't arise from taking risks. The problem arises when you don't understand it, when you go in blindfolded, when you've, let's say, transitioned from just LIC or PPF or fixed deposits, all of a sudden you're going into a very volatile seesaw. Let's say I move into futures and options, right? Which has a 10,000% payoff and a chance of a complete capital erosion. I need to understand what that is. Now, futures and options aren't good or bad. I need to understand what that is. Provided I'm going in with my eyes open, I'm going in knowing what to expect, I'm educating myself. That's the only thing that really matters. So, understand the interplay of risk and reward. If I need to achieve a 10% or 12% or 13% return over the next 20 years, it's not going to come from taking no risks at all. So, after you've set your SMART goals, the next step is to actually really embrace and understand risk and reward. And the third and most important step, save. So there are two very, very important points in this last graphic. One is growth assets, two is disciplined manner. So I can't stress enough on the importance of both. If you're not going to invest in growth assets, it's very unlikely that you will actually create wealth. You may create a savings pool. You may even end up with 1 crore rupees when you retire. But will you be wealthy? Will your money actually have outpaced inflation, grown into a large corpus? The answer is no. Similarly, if you aren't disciplined, if you start with that goal, okay, and I keep drawing an analogy to health and fitness, because if you start with the goal of losing weight, but then you start eating sweets every day, or you don't work out on a weekly basis, you will never achieve those goals, because discipline is the key to that. Similarly, to create wealth from your investments, I believe you've got to be a very, very, very disciplined investor, which means don't skip your SIPs, don't redeem goal-based investments, stay the course. If it means enough to you to create wealth from your investments, you have to put in that effort, put in that discipline to actually ensure it. So these are the three steps. It's not just enough to have a nice photo of a car on your wall and say, I'm going to achieve it. You got to set smart goals,
Right.
understand the interplay of risk and reward, and last but not the least, save in growth assets and in a disciplined way. So why goals? I'm going to leave this slide at that. And actually, before I move on to telling you why goals, there's something I skipped in the beginning. There is a Q&A box on your screens. And please feel free to post any questions that you have, either related to this webinar or any other investment concept. And we will take those at the end of the session. So please use the Q&A box anytime you feel necessary. Anything pops into your mind. So goals are a magnet, right? This is what I feel. So when you have a goal and it's important, it's relevant. Now, buying a pressure cooker in 6 months is not a relevant goal. It's never going to magnetize me into sacrificing stuff, into having a disciplined approach. But yeah, my kids' higher studies, visualizing them going to a Harvard or a Yale and me funding that without a loan is a brilliant goal to have. I need to write that down somewhere and I need to understand why I'm actually going through that pain. So once I have that in mind, goals serve as a magnet. So you asked me, Vishakha, why goals are important and what are the steps of goal planning. So these are the steps, and they're important simply because they're a magnet and they keep you aligned, they make you stay the course. And I believe that the ultimate way to create wealth is to begin with the end in mind. I'll also tell you a very funny quote from there's an American baseball player called Yogi Berra. I love his quotes because he used to say all kinds of weird stuff and they used to end up sounding very relevant. So, accidental wisdom, you can Google it at the end of this. So, he said, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. Now, when you wrap your head around that, it makes no sense at all. But at a very deep and profound level, that makes a lot of sense. So, know where you're going if you want to create wealth from your investments. I think that is absolutely critical.
No, absolutely, Anirudh. Not only investments, I was just while just going through the discussion, something pop up in my mind. So basically, let's say if somebody wants to save, invest, what all the aspirations or what all the goals any person, any investor can typically have. For example, you want to pay a down payment for your house or your child's higher studies, or down payment of your car, or you want to retire comfortably. So here we have basically, we want to do a small exercise with all of you, wherein these are certain objectives with what every investor could have. So I would want everybody just to type in the chat box, what do you think that in order to save or in order to have a wealth of 4.5 crores, what is the amount of monthly savings you would feel that you would require in order to achieve them? So in
So
case if you can
simple
just,
exercise,
yeah,
off the top of your head, whatever comes to your mind, mental maths, in the next 30 seconds, let's put it in the chat box and figure out how close our estimate is.
right. So in case if you can just type in your estimates, what do you think 4.5 crores in the next 30 years? What is the monthly saving that you might require?
So you're getting some answers coming in, Vishaka.
Yes. So basically, the time horizon is different, but we are saying over the next 30 years, 4.5 crores is the corpus that
So
we
you got a
have.
lot of interesting answers coming in,
Yes,
Vishaka.
yes.
So
So I can
wide
see
variation.
so the variation is from 10,000 to there's 30,000, 50,000, 1 lakh also. Some people have given an answer. So, but if I just give you an answer, it is actually less than 30,000. So in order to have a wealth of 4.5 crores, you would actually require for less than 30,000 to achieve these goals.
So that's great. I think great exercise. And I see so many smart people present here. Some of them have been spot on, actually.
Yes,
So
actually,
they
yes.
understand it, and they're certainly
Right.
smarter than I am in terms of doing quick mental maths.
Mental maths, yeah.
so, so,
Right,
I think very interesting thing jumps out. See, when we begin to plan our goals, and we
right,
set all these targets and numbers, and they all seem very, very imposing. They seem very scary. I mean, if
right.
someone came and told me, "Hey, Anirudh, you need to save 4.23 crores," I'd say, "Oh my God, sorry. I mean, I can't do it. It's too tough." And but if
Right.
someone came and told me, "Hey, all you need to put away is 30,000 rupees a month, less than
Yeah.
30,000, in a disciplined way over the course of all these goals," I'd say, "Hey, I think that's something which I can do."
Right.
Many people have EMIs of 30,000, personal loan EMIs, credit card EMIs,
Right.
and personal loans and home loans. So 30,000 for a middle-aged earning person is all right. It's a fair sum of money, I admit. But when you put it on beside 4.23 crores, I think it's doable, and it makes me feel, wow, there is a chance of actually creating wealth from my savings. But how? Please enlighten us. How does this massive difference between 4.23 crores and 29,942 come up? What's the secret sauce?
The secret sauce is basically nothing, and it's actually compounding. So a lot of people present here would understand maybe that what exactly is compounding. So I will just give you a brief introduction to compounding. It is nothing but returns on your returns. So what you get, returns on what you returns are there in your investments, right? So what happens? Let's say I'll just give you a very simple example. I have 10 lakhs to invest, and I have two avenues. Either I can take a road, what Anirudh said, that I can go for the risk aversion assets, wherein I don't want to take much risk, and that particular investments yields me a return of 8%. On the other hand, I also have an option I can put into the growth assets. Let's say I get a return of 12% there, right? So if you see in the initial 10 years, the difference basically is not much. It is 31 lakhs vis-a-vis 21 lakhs. I think the difference, yes, then 10 lakhs. But
I say that's quite a bit even then.
that is actually, yes, that is 10 lakhs is also a very good amount. But the actual, the game starts at the takeoff point. So just see at the end of 20 years, the same 10 lakhs becomes 96 lakhs. And if I go into the risk averse asset, it becomes 46 lakhs. That means there's a, the money basically becomes 2 times if I go into the growth assets. And over the next 30 years, there's a lot of difference. So the difference is 3x actually. And I would say this is actually the long-term cost of the risk aversion. I know 8% right now, the difference between 8% and 12% in absolute terms is just 4%. It seems कि 4% में यार क्या हो जाएगा, इतना क्या difference आ जाएगा? But over the long period of time, 30 years, this basically creates a huge difference, and this is the cost of not taking that risk.
I think two things jump out at me when you say all these,
Yeah.
when you present this data. One,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people earn a lot less than 8% after taxes on their
Ha.
low risk investment. So this is
Right.
just an illustration of So a lot of people may earn 3, 4, 5%. If I put my money in an FD,
Post-tax, the
which
effective
is
return, right?
6%, my post-tax return is around 4%. Similarly, in an
Correct.
LIC policy, if you actually just plug that data in an Excel sheet, it
Right.
shocks people to realize what the returns are, and we'll show that in the next slide. So one thing that jumps out is, and I have also seen equity investments delivering more than 12. Equity,
Right.
real estate, gold, whatever. We're talking about growth assets specifically. For
Right.
example, I believe the Nifty return in the last 20 years is around 11%.
11%, right?
And most actively managed mutual funds, for example, have outperformed this quite handsomely,
Right.
right? And so that's one thing. So the first thing is that actual gap is actually going to be much more. And I believe that is the difference between a wealthy person and an average person in terms of a saver who's earned much less. That
Right.
gap keeps building over time because
Right.
the actual difference probably is more than 4%. It should be maybe 5 or 6%.
Right.
Secondly, the other thing I see from your slide is just 4%. I mean, it seems so less. हाँ,
Less.
मैंने आपसे 4% कम कमाया. Doesn't seem much, but
Right.
that 4% can make the difference between me retiring wealthy or retiring with a very struggle-filled 25 years ahead, right?
Right. Right.
So
So
that's compounding.
correct. Right. And also, if we just go on to the next slide, and when I actually talk and dig deeper into the products or the investment avenues, right? So everybody, and not only here, but even I talk about my parents or my relatives or my friends, they're still stuck in various. They don't want to take that risk, right? And they are basically in investing heavily into life insurance policies or PPF, right? For example, a life insurance policy says, or the agent says, that you invest 36 lakhs over the next 30 years and you would actually get an amount of 83 lakhs. I think this look very great, right? It's my money is basically getting double it. I get more than double. But when I actually put this data and I compare it with the other avenues available, I think the story changes completely. So on the other hand, if I just go into something which gives me a 12% return and I put that 10,000 rupees per month over the next 30 years, the difference, the amount that I can aim or can accumulate is 3.5 crores.
And it's 10x the principal at stake.
10x the principal,
10x.
exactly.
Yeah.
And if you see the opportunity loss, I am doing that saving, I am still saving in life insurance, I'm not spending that money, I'm keeping it for my future, and I want to achieve a goal, I want to give a good education and have a good retirement. But the money is really working for me or not? Vis-a-vis, if I have the same opportunity to invest this money, wherein the same time horizon, the same amount, but the difference is basically, is huge. That means 3.5 crores minus 83 lakhs, what I would have got from my LIC. I think that is the opportunity loss or the cost, I would say, that not going into the growth assets. So
And I
I
think one
think,
of the things that, sorry to interrupt you, but when
yeah,
we presented this data, I got reminded of an LIC agent who called me up 3 days back and said, "Sir, आप 10 साल में जितना पैसा या 30 साल में पैसा डालते रहो और आपका पैसा 2.5 गुना बढ़ जाएगा."
right,
That's a standard pitch, and it sounds awfully good actually. If you just in isolation see harm, because you're isolating a number which is 2.5
right,
times, not
right,
realizing that you could have achieved 10 times by just aiming for a growth asset and following some of the principles that we'll talk about. So it's not just enough to invest into growth assets. Now we need to figure out how
what,
to do it successfully.
correct.
So
It's so that is what we said. So it's actually looks very easy, but it is not that easy, right? So yeah.
So I think one of the lessons, so summing up the lessons that you keep giving us throughout the presentation, Vishaka,
Yeah.
I'll keep doing that. I think the first lesson that you said is goals are absolutely super important and they need to be smart and you need to have a plan of
Right.
action and you need to have them written down somewhere. That's the first thing.
Absolutely.
Second, we need to not let our natural risk aversion, we are all naturally risk averse, whether we believe it or not. There are very few people who are by nature risk takers or risk loving. We are conservative. But being too risk averse, from what I've understood, maybe in the short run, it's not going to affect me much. And me and my friend who's not risk averse and I'm risk averse, and we're going to be more or less on an even keel. But I think over 10, 15, 20 years, that gap is going to keep widening. And over the long run, that gap is it's like the Grand Canyon.
Right.
That's the key lesson here.
Correct. So
So I'm going to move on to SIPs. Vishaka, you have anything to add?
No, so basically, yes, we were talking about the growth assets. I think this is a time when we actually give some more information that what these growth assets and, equities, by that we mean, and what should a person look into it, and what are the pros, and what are the, what they should watch out for. I think that is something that we'll jump into.
So we are very firm believers in equities as an
Yeah,
asset class, and I think if you do the maths yourself, you'll realize
yeah,
over the long term, and I mean over the long term, not actually no asset class, including real estate or gold or private equity, anything has in a consistent manner delivered returns which are better than your listed equities. Like I mentioned, even the Sensex and the Nifty, which are your bare bones indices, have delivered 11, 12% CAGR over the long term. Right? Now, I think one of the main mistakes that people make in equities is to speculate and to not sip. So a lot of people who are present here today understand SIPs in theory, but let's delve a little deeper into the three benefits. Because I believe if you understand why you're doing something and what are the benefits you're getting, there's a much higher chance of remaining aligned. So I think the first one is rupee cost averaging. A lot of us understand it in principle, which is basically when markets go down, you want to be buying more of something, not just equities, but anything. You don't want to be
right.
buying less of it. Similarly, when something rises in price, you want to be buying a lot less of it, if not zero, right? So, rupee cost averaging is a mechanism by which, by putting money month in, month out, or week in, week out in a disciplined way, by putting a fixed sum of money, what happens is magically my average NAV stays well below the actual average cost of the NAV on that day. So actually, my average NAV is very smoothened out. It's below the natural average. So when actually there's a rise, when the cycles reverse and equities start going up, I have a much wider base of units on which that growth happens. So rupee cost averaging is is a great benefit. At the end of this presentation, we'll cover why most people don't benefit from it. Compounding, we already discussed. Growth on growth. Einstein called it the eighth wonder of the world. I firmly believe so. Okay, if your 100 becomes 110, and next year your 110 grows and moves to 121, so you got to keep widening your base, and that base will only widen when your corpus is growing over the long term. So equities ultimately give you the best benefit of compounding because it's not a linear kind of a return. If your 100 rupees in a bullish year grows to 140, in the next year 140 will grow. So that's how they work. So I think compounding is a great benefit of equities, and through SIPs we can really ensure that we benefit from compounding. And last but not the least, super critical, I mentioned this earlier, discipline. So there's a saying that a SIP is a good EMI. So there are bad EMIs and good EMIs. The bad EMIs are the banks earning compound interest from our hard-earned savings, because they're also earning compound interest. And the good EMI is us earning compound interest from the markets. So I think uh, I say this as an example to many people. If you didn't do an SIP, and if you said, hey, I'm going to just put in 5,000 rupees every month into equity mutual funds on my own, it would be, I'd be very surprised if anybody would put in more than 5 or 6 tranches in a year, because our lives are chaotic. There's always some need that takes precedence. I've got
Right.
this bill to pay, I've got those fees to pay, something broke down in my house, I've got this loan which I've got to prepay, I've got to lend money to someone. So what happens is, because you don't have that good EMI running, and because you're trying to use your own willpower to put in money every month, that doesn't happen. So I think that by enforcing discipline in a loose manner, mind you can always stop and start your SIPs, but it's there in the back of your head that this SIP is running for my kids' education. So I think that discipline is automatically maintained. So these are the three benefits of investing through SIPs. And I'll also very briefly touch upon how SIPs save you from yourself. And I mentioned earlier that goals are important, growth assets are important. Then why don't people make returns on it? Maybe 3 out of 10 people I come across who actually say, I have made returns on equities successfully over the long term, but on paper they are the best. So there's a very interesting dilemma here, and we need to figure out why. And I believe firmly that the main reason for that is our own mind.
Right.
So markets oscillate, right? Vishaka, you've been here several years. Have you ever seen a time when markets have been a straight line graph and very smooth and basically not moved up or down?
Markets are unpredictable. So you don't know what will happen on Monday. You don't know what number it will close at.
There are
It's very
Black Mondays,
unpredictable.
Black
Black
Fridays,
mind,
White
yes.
Fridays, White Wednesdays, the
I think that
US.
is what we call it as risk, right? Because you don't know what will happen.
Risk is volatility. The
Volatility, yeah.
classic
It
definition
could
of
be
risk is
up, it could be
volatility.
down, correct. So a lot of people say, and I will just share my experience, that इसमें risk है. Risk is not only the negative returns, risk is also the positive return that you get. That's the reason we say we don't have a risk in LIC. Why? Because we get that return, the fixed return.
Yes.
Whereas in these revenue, the growth assets or the SIPs or not mutual funds or equities, we say there's a risk involved because the ups and downs, the volatility.
So I think this is an interesting graph because it
Yeah.
shows you how our mind works across these various cycles, right?
Right.
So when the markets move up, actually any market, take real estate, take the example of gold, which saw 950 crores of inflows in the ETFs in July after it had gone up. So it's very normal to feel euphoric and to get that confidence to invest, right? I mean, it's very natural.
Right.
Confidence comes from seeing, wow, ये बहुत अच्छा कर रहा है, ये चीज अच्छा कर रहा है, इसका रिटर्न अच्छा है. It doesn't come from seeing, अच्छा ये -20% है, मैं बहुत confident feel कर रहा हूँ, I'm feeling very euphoric about investing into this asset. It surely doesn't come from that, correct? Have you ever felt that way, Vishaka? Oh, this is down 50%, I'm feeling super confident, I'm really
I would
euphoric.
feel the opposite then.
That's natural.
Right.
So that's natural. So when anything goes up in price, in euphoria, a lot of money starts chasing it. People start
Right.
putting in lump sums. People start selling their house and putting it in equity or whatever. People start going in lock, stock, and barrel without really thinking. This is
Right.
normal. Similarly, when things have fallen and when everything is really bad and when the sentiment is negative and when the media is plastered with doomsday predictions and bloodbath is a word that the media loves. So at that point, there's a lot of depression, panic, and these kind of negative emotions, right? Now, what happens is our natural tendency as investors is to, you know, buy a lot of any investment at the point of euphoria because we're feeling confident and to exit at the point of depression. And I've seen this happening and I have also felt inclined to doing it myself. So this applies to everyone. And the natural tendency, and I know in March, April, when the Nifty hit 7,500, there were so many people, myself included, who were wondering, worrying, whether it would go to 5,000, 4,000, is the game over? And that's when the rise starts happening. And I guess the main benefit of SIPs is that because I'm investing dispassionately, without emotion, without much action into all these cycles, I end up not buying too much in a euphoric state and not selling out or not buying too less in a depressed state. So if we were, like I said, if someone said, don't do an SIP, put in 5,000 a month on your own, I don't think I'd be investing much money when the markets had fallen so much. I think
Right.
I'd skip my regular investment for that 1 month. So that's where SIPs come in. And I think it really saves you from yourself because to overcome these mental barriers requires a lot of mental toughness, I think. And Vishaka, I think on this note, tell us about the last 12 months because they've been chaotic. And I think a lot has happened. Can you tell us about some of these mental biases, which just in the last 12 months people have had to face?
For sure, Anirudh, and this is what we have personally experienced. So, the last 12 months, I'll just share a very recent example that happened with me. So, one of my friend, so he's basically a non-finance guy, and he's investing into market. He's doing his SIPs and investing into equities. So basically, he started off in January 2018 when Nifty was somewhere close to 11,000 points, right? And he invested without any goals, without any objectives. Just it was an ad hoc investment and he invested through some bank. Then I spoke to my friend last year in the month of September when Nifty was still 11,000 points, right? So there was
Stuck for
absolute
almost a
stuck,
year and a half.
right? And obviously the behavioral trap, and I completely agree. Nobody would want to see कि यार मैं जब मैंने इन्वेस्ट किया था तभी भी इतना ही था और अभी भी कोई रिटर्न ही नहीं है. So that was then the general tendency of what he thought, that things are basically not going anywhere. I think markets are not going anywhere. This is the end. I think I should take out the money and then put it somewhere, into FDs. At least I would get some close to 4-5% return. At least my investment will start seeing some positive return.
And then
And
what
that
happened
was
after Madam Sitaraman's famous announcement? What
so.
exactly happened?
Now, after that, since economy needed a push, and this is what the government did, so Sitaraman announced certain policies, and we saw that policies outcomes resulted in markets going up, right? And in the matter of 4-5 months, from September till January, markets went up, and then that was a FOMO. So FOMO is a very, netizen term, fear of missing out, that oops, I should missed it. I should now invest it, I should lock it and basically get that return, what others are getting it, right? Now, after that, obviously, if you see,
Big bad
there was a
COVID-19.
big bag, nobody expected it, we didn't know and nobody knew, right? And then there was March, when actually we saw markets drastically falling. The fall was very drastic. We as advisors were also didn't know where it was going. One day it was 10% down, next day 7% down. So there was a herd mentality, right? And I completely agree, nobody would want to see a negative return and would see their money going down. So that tendency was, oh shit, ये क्या हो गया, तो disaster हो गया. मार्केट सब बोल रहे हैं मार्केट गिर रही है, न्यूज़ में आ रहा है इकोनॉमी का कुछ नहीं हो रहा है, एंड कोविड विल बेसिकली डिमोलिश एवरीथिंग, एंड आई शुड बेटरली जितना लॉस हुआ है उसको incur करके I should take my money out. So that was the herd mentality.
I think there's a famous saying that when your Uber driver starts giving you investment advice, it's the time to do the opposite. And I came
Right.
across a lot of people, chai wala and pan wala, who
Right.
were saying market to khatam ho gaya.
Market खत्म हो गया है, कुछ नहीं दिख रहा है आगे, what will happen? So then people obviously, if my 100 rupees has went down to 70, then obviously I would like to save my 70 so that it should not further go down to 50, right? So that was a tendency. And then thereafter, we didn't expect it the way it got down, and the next 2 months it basically recovered the entire losses. So that was, markets will basically, in the month of May, still markets were recovering, but that biasness was there कि नहीं अभी भी कुछ नहीं पता, कल को ये दोबारा गिर सकता है, I will wait, I will see the पूरा stability आ जाएगा, then I will basically take an entry. So that was a recency bias. And then in the month of August, when we are still at same 11,000 points, we have recovered most of it. Still, the recent thing that's still stuck in the mind is COVID. What
People
will
are anchored. People are
People are
anchored to the fact
anchored.
that COVID,
Correct.
just to COVID, yeah,
They
correct.
just COVID, right? So COVID will, the long term effect of COVID gonna stay. Economy is basically not doing anything. You see the numbers, the GDP going down, and so on. Still, that the fear is still there, and I think we generally take it as a mistake also, what investors generally make, and that is the fence sitting. So I will still wait, I will still see the stability coming in, and then I shall basically take an entry. So this is a very recent example, and I think a lot of investors, not lol, I think 99% investors would have gone through such, their own behavioral traps, because, and it is a basically 2-2 महीने 3-3 महीने के बाद कुछ ना कुछ different चीज हो रही है market में, and this is what markets are. It's unpredictable.
So I think this actually explains why it's difficult.
Correct.
Right? It's simple but difficult. I think
Correct.
because in the long run, equities are great, SIPs give returns, but just look in the last 12 months
12
alone, there have been
months.
so many pitfalls, so many traps which one
Right.
investor would have had to avoid. Now multiply that by 10 years or 20 years in retirement, and you've maybe got 200 such missteps which an investor could take.
And interestingly, yes, if we basically move ahead, it's a very interesting graph. So basically, we just spoke about the last 12 months, and we saw a lot of fluctuations, right? Now, if I just, equity market in India is not a very recent one. Equity market is there since last so many years, right? Is this the only event that has happened? If I just see right from 1991 till 2021, right, 2020, there are a lot of events that have happened. So we had dot-com bust, we had global financial crisis, we had Brexit, we had demonetization, we have global trade wars, and now we have COVID-19. But if you just interestingly see, the markets are always forward looking. The graph is always forward looking. It's a bumpy ride for sure. It's not a straight line, but this bumpy ride is also basically going ahead, going up. Today we have COVID, maybe in the next 2 years there will be some other event, maybe in the next 3 years there will be something else, and maybe in the next 10 years there will be n number of more events. Governments change, policies change, governors change, new companies step in, few companies go bankrupt, and so on. The story will be the same going forward as well. But interestingly, if I just see the return from an equity market, if I just see the Nifty return from 2000 till 2020, it is 11% annualized despite of all these events that have happened in the past.
So I think one thing that jumps out at me here is very interesting, that markets are completely unpredictable in the short run, but relatively
Exactly.
predictable in the
Predictable
long
in the
run.
long run.
I think
Correct.
that's the only thing in the world which one cannot predict in the short run, but one can definitely, with a significant degree of assurance, say that
Right.
equities in the long run will go up. And I
Correct.
also see one more very important thing in this graph that you've made, Vishaka, is there are extended periods of time. I
Right.
mean, 2-3 years when there would be tremendous pain. I think
Absolutely.
those are the times when
Testing
pitfalls
times, I
happen. And
guess.
although
Yeah.
on paper it's 11%, but actually how investors manage their emotions and their expectations during these negative phases, I think makes all the difference, if you ask me.
And that is very, Aniruddha, I am completely with investors also because this is the hard-earned money, right? So, like we said, equity markets are something which is not a straight line. So you would see the money going down, and then few years later, you see the positive returns coming in. So that behavioral trap is something that everybody should watch out for.
So moving on to, these are just examples. These are
Yeah.
not necessarily funds that we recommend. We've just used them as example cases. Um, I see some very interesting numbers here. Two interesting numbers jump out at me here from this slide. One is the 10-year returns look pretty fabulous, irrespective of the fund that I've invested into. And these are paper returns, of course. We need to go through all those roughs and tumbles to actually achieve them, or we need to sit in a cave. You have to do one of these two things: invest and sit in a cave and forget the world, or be part of the world and somehow ride that rough ride and
Right.
understand equities, embrace risk, and
Right.
understand how SIPs work. So these are the only two options, if you ask me. The other thing I see, even here, if somebody started a SIP in 2010, their returns in the first 3 years, which is from 10 to 13, and mind you, 3 years is a fairly long time, it's not really a very short span of time, would have been significantly negative.
Correct.
And I think this is something which happens time and again. I think one mistake people make is expecting linear returns or not understanding exactly how SIPs work, which basically means you may be sitting on an 8% return someday, which becomes minus 2% in a matter of a few months. But then you have to keep riding that wave. So I think when I see this, and I encourage everyone who's attending this webinar to go back, go to any site, go to Value Research, Money Control. There are so many SIP calculators there. Plug in any decent fund. I'm talking about a middle quartile to above quartile performer over any SIP period, and see the kind of returns on paper that you would have earned. And I keep saying on paper because there's many a slip between the cup and the lip. There's a famous saying: paper returns are great, but to achieve them, you have to go through
Not
all those
easy.
hurdles, I think. So I think at FinEdge, so we've created 3 rules. Now I think let me again sum up all the lessons that we've had so far. The first one is you have to have goals. Second, you have to embrace risk. You have to move away from the safety net of LICs, FDs, with a full understanding of why we're doing so and what to expect. And third, we have to watch out for our own behavioral biases in order to harness the power of equities. So I think the first thing is to actually understand what to expect. When you're starting an SIP, and especially if you're doing it directly and without advice, you need to prepare yourself. I think the seeds of success lie in the preparation stage, which means know what to expect, know what you're getting into, understand, evaluate, see past returns across many phases, and then figure it out. Don't get in with a below average understanding of how your returns will actually flow. And patience is absolutely critical. Rome wasn't built in a day, but Rome was eventually built. That's the second part of the saying. So patience is very, very important in order to build a sizable corpus from equities by investing systematically. Second, do not stop and start your SIPs. Now, there may be some times in your life when you will need to stop and start them simply because you're constrained for cash flows or any other reasons. You may need to channel that money elsewhere. That's very different. Don't stop and start your SIPs to time the markets, thinking, hey, I will stop when it gets, I'll stop right now, I'll restart when the economy improves, etc., etc. There are some interesting questions on the correlation between economy and markets. I'd love to take that up at the end. So, in an effort to predict, don't stop and start, because then you're taking away the rocket fuel. Because we generally stop our SIPs at a time when it is the best time for an SIP to be running. And we, in
Right.
euphoria, that graph that we spoke about, we start them at a time when the returns have already gone up. So if we keep stopping and starting, we're actually taking away the rocket fuel, we're taking away the power, we're taking away the strength of that SIP. And rule number 3, super important. We always come back to goals here at FinEdge because we've seen that it works brilliantly. The worst thing you can do is to have an ad hoc SIP, which basically means my friend says XYZ fund is really great. Let me start a little SIP there, a little one there, and let me stop this and start that. And just doing an SIP investment for the sake of it will not help create wealth. In the long run, you have to begin with the end in mind and align your specific SIPs to those goals. And that makes a world of difference, believe me. It makes a difference to your behavior. It makes a difference to your outlook. It makes a difference to your approach. It makes a difference to how you handle volatile markets. So it just makes you a exponentially better investor, according to me. So these are 3 rules. Again, nothing all of us don't know, just a refresher. Prepare yourself, don't stop and start your SIPs, and make sure that they're linked to your goals. So that is basically the conclusion. Vishaka, if you could sum up before we move into Q&A, a little bit about what we've discussed so far, and then we move on to the Q&A for a few minutes.
So I think we have basically said all the secrets to the wealth creation. So first of all, set your SMART goals. Aim for returns, I would say inflation beating returns, the real returns and not just the returns. Understand that yes, there's a risk, embrace that risk. Watch out for your behavioral traps, basically just whenever that behavioral trap is there, just see whether what action should I take, what decision should I take in that particular scenario. Also, be disciplined and think long term, and take the advantage of equities. And I think the best way of doing it is through SIPs. So basically, and like we said in the beginning, that it looks very easy, it's very interesting, but it's not that simple, right? It's not that it's on the paper, it's on the presentation, it's very
simple but not easy.
Not easy, yeah. So you always would want somebody to counsel you, to guide you, to handhold you during your own behavioral traps, right? And there is where we basically as advisors come in. So I will just tell you about FinEdge. Basically, we are India's leading financial planning company, and we have clients across all the 600 cities and 55 countries around globe. And we basically have a bionic financial planning model. Basically, we are dealing from a single office, and there is no geographical thing. So basically, we are dealing from a single office to in dealing with clients across the country. And we actually use all these we have a very scientific process that we follow. Whatever we actually explained in the entire presentation, we use that particular process while planning for our financial goals for our clients. So at the end of the presentation, I would say if anybody would like to get in touch, please feel free to drop in your doubts, or
there is a poll. At the end, once you log out, there's a small survey link which has 2-3 questions. At the end, you can also indicate whether you'd like to engage with one of our financial advisors for a discussion on your goals. No strings attached. We'll get your financial plan made and show you the roadmap. And if you become our client, it'll be wonderful. If not, even then, it's wonderful.
Correct. At least you will know the clarity and you can take your step forward. That matters the most. The first step requires a lot of. So once somebody said that it's very easy to, it's very difficult to take a first step, and it's very easy to remain focused. But pehla step lena is very important.
Shall we move into Q&A, Vishaka?
Yeah, for sure. Yes.
Thank you so much for your attention. We'll move into Q&A now, and then we'll conclude after about 10 minutes. Vishaka, over to you.
So we have a first question, Anirudh, from Mr. Hemant Bhatia, and he says, what is better investment? Is it investing better into a digital gold or a physical gold like jewelry?
I think you can take that up, Vishaka.
For sure. So Mr. Bhatia, what I feel, it's now the objective, whether you wanted to go for an investment or whether it's a utility purpose. If you want to go into an investment, then you should for sure go into ETFs, that is exchange traded funds. But if you're looking forward to the utility purpose, then obviously you go into the physical gold or the jewelry. Because obviously when you go into the utility, when you go for a jewelry, I think there are a lot of making charges that are involved. And the investment would not be that liquid.
I'll quickly add to that. In case you need to accumulate gold for a future goal, let's say your daughter's wedding or something, which is 10, 15 years later, still do an ETF. And then when the wedding date approaches, redeem that ETF and buy gold then. So you don't
Right.
have to pay storage charges, locker charges, all that stuff, and you still benefit from price appreciation. You will have gold, except that you will not have it in physical form. You can always convert your units into physical gold when the time arises.
Right. The next question is from Mr. Omdat Sharma. He says that 8% is a good return and inflation is 6%. Net return will be just 2%. Is it not illusionary to look at large projection numbers based on returns? I think what he's saying is that we basically showed in the slide that there are two ways. Either I can go into the 8% return or I can
Yeah,
go into the 12% return.
yeah.
So it says, yeah, is
Yeah,
it
so
not?
it is definitely illusionary to look at large projection numbers based on absolute returns. You must look at them based on real returns. Like you also mentioned in the webinar, I think real returns are the way to go. You have to consider inflation, and it is definitely, if you just look at absolute returns, it is definitely illusionary.
Right. Uh, in the compounding slide, I think Mr. Rajesh wanted to ask that that is a good the takeoff point. So he's investing in SIP since 10 years, not uniformly though. So, but he is not seeing any returns apart from 2-3 times, and he has stopped his investments. But the fund performance changes over years, right? So, any take on that?
So I think we need to go back to the golden rules of finance. So if you need to benefit from SIPs, you have to keep them running. Stopping and starting, unfortunately, will work against you. And so there will be low return phases, and it is extremely painful. It is not fun to see your money at negative or flat returns. But there's no saying when that takeoff point will happen. There's a recent example I talk about. There is a fund called DSP Small Cap Fund.
Yeah.
There's an investor who had been investing in it for the last 2.5 years, and his return was 3.5% negative CAGR. And within 22 days, it became 8%. So if and now the no one can predict when those 22 days or 60 days or 1 month will actually turn around your investment completely. So you've got to stick around for 7 to 10 years without stopping them or without trying to time the markets with your SIPs. And yes, fund performances change over years. You're absolutely right, Rajesh, which is why you need to review your investments at least once a year. It's very important. There are occasions when at Finedge we have stopped certain SIPs and even diverted the lump sum to other funds. But we don't do that based on short-term performance just because someone held Reliance and someone didn't, or someone held Unitech and someone didn't, and so showed a short-term performance uptick. We do that when there are structural, fundamental changes in the way the fund is being managed, handled, in the AMC itself, in the fund philosophy. That is when it makes sense to, because otherwise it's all just lagging, right? You're acting in a lagging manner. You have to act in a leading manner. And for that, I believe a good advisor can definitely support you, not in predicting which SIPs will do the best, but in being more aware and possibly tweaking your SIP portfolio once every year and ensuring it's optimized.
And also ensuring that the investments are aligned to your goals, the
Absolutely right.
objectives. Yeah. The next question is from Sumant. So basically, the question is that if SIPs are running for more than 10 years and still the returns are negative, what should we do then? I think
What do
then
you
we
think?
should, it's very
Tricky
important
one.
to have a portfolio review done, what exactly these investments are and where the money is. Also depends on which asset class. I believe, assuming that these are all equities, right? So it's very important to have that portfolio review done, Sumant, in case if we would be more than happy to do that for you. So in case you can share
Also,
the same.
if a fund with an SIP is running negative for 10 years and the SIP has been done in a disciplined way, highly likely that it's not a very good fund or portfolio, or
Right,
it is likely that the SIP hasn't been run consistently. So it can only be one of these two, because
right.
over 10 years, any period, I have seen SIPs delivering great returns. We skipped one question also from Omdat, which is what would be some good
Right.
investments if retirement is 5 years away.
5 years away.
I'll just answer that very quickly.
Yeah.
So if you're 5 years away, you're somewhat in the middle zone. You don't have much time, so you really can't take a lot of risk. At the same time, you shouldn't be fully risk averse and dump all your money into FDs either. I'd recommend something called a dynamic asset allocation fund for that kind of a period. And also, 2 years after investing into the dynamic asset allocation fund, I would start an STP into pure debt funds. So I do that kind of a strategy to optimize your retirement portfolio.
Right. Mr. Amit Singla says that markets, and this is the same question by Mr. Umdat also, that the markets are going up like pre-COVID levels, but the economy is not looking into a good shape, and basically it's as compared to the pre-COVID level. So what exactly would be the reason? I would say this is not actually, when we say Sensex, we see the top 30 companies. But out of that top 30 companies, there are only 4, 5 stocks which are basically pulling the market levels up. And Reliance, HDFC, Kotak. So these are the few companies to name. I think the entire economy has basically not, the stocks have not gone up. So I think the markets are slightly inflated at this point in time.
I think so. Two things. One is there's been a lot of liquidity, Amit, that have chased the top 10, 15 stocks, like Vishaka has said.
Yes,
The second you go beyond that, and especially if you go beyond the top 100 into mid and small caps, which are the real depth and breadth of the equity markets, because there are
correct.
2,200 stocks that are actively traded. You have to look beyond the top 10, 20. They are still well below what they were even in 2018. And I mean, a lot of these good companies are trading at discounts of 40, 50, 60, 70% even now. So what we're seeing, like I said earlier, is the Nifty and Sensex, because the media sensationalizes them. But the broader equities are still low, far below what they were 3 years back. Secondly, very, very important concept for any equity investor to grasp is the economy and the market, financial markets very rarely move in tandem. They don't do they just don't move in sync. Very often you will feel that fundamentals are great, but markets are just not rallying. And very often you will feel fundamentals are not that supportive, and markets are also forward looking, right? So
Yes.
they're not looking at the situation as it stands today. Yes, definitely we're in a challenging situation today, but if you look at metrics like our forex reserves and our trade deficit with China, if you look at things like the results of our top banks, of Reliance, if you look at our exports year on year, it's recovered to almost 90%. Maruti sold some 1 lakh passenger cars. Tata sales are actually up year on year. So the market is probably predicting that we've got a grasp on the situation. Yes, our GDP fell 24%, but now we start off with a much lower base. And I believe, I'm by no means predicting that things will just recover unidirectionally from here. But I think we have a better grasp on the disease and on the COVID situation, and markets will now digest this and move forward to tracking fundamentals. So markets and economy don't move in tandem, which is exactly why we shouldn't use economic indicators, which are basically lagging indicators, to invest and take our investment decisions.
Correct. So we have this question. The name is not mentioned. So it says, is it a good time to start investing or should one wait?
What do you think, Vishaka? What
I,
is the
s-
best time to invest?
I would say every day is a good day. So plus if that is what the behavioral trap we spoke about. It's a very important to take a step forward. Markets will be up, down every day, every year, every month. It's just that very important to understand why you are investing, what is the goal, and take a step forward.
And I also think at such valuations, when you rightfully said that things are a little stretched, it's
Yeah.
also important to stagger your money in.
Stagger your money,
So if
right?
I've got 10 lakh rupees, I don't go in
Yeah.
with 10 lakhs. I go in with
Right.
10 lakhs in a liquid or an overnight fund. And then I stagger my money in through weekly systematic transfer plans, so that I actually, take advantage of these wild gyrations in the market and I average my cost in. So I'm reducing my risk. So now is the time. I think the best time to invest was yesterday. That's what I always tell people. And but the right way to do it depends upon the situation at that point. And currently, we've seen a massive run up, like someone rightfully pointed out in this webinar. Of fundamentals are probably a little disaligned with market levels. However, the broader market is still low, but it's makes sense to be a little prudent and to stagger your money.
And also the same, there's another question from the same attendee and says, what should one consider before investing directly into mutual funds?
I can answer that at so many levels, but I'll give you a shot at it, Vishaka, before I make my point.
So, see, first of all, like we said, it's very important to set out the objective and the time horizon that you have, right? And in mutual funds, we have various categories. So, I would say mutual fund is a very diversified tool. It takes care of almost all the requirements for an investor. If you want to invest for short term or long term, if you want to go into less risk or more risk, so first of all, we need to understand what exactly is the time that we have and what is the risk appetite, and then we figure out the category that we want to go in, and then we go into the fund selection, and then obviously the mode of investment.
Or you let an advisor do that for you, because from what I've understood, direct plan investments,
Yeah,
unadvised, unfortunately, for most people haven't yielded very good results. And
right.
we on a daily basis have people coming
Get a
to
lot
us
of,
migrating from
yes.
direct plans and saying, hey, okay, I went direct, I
Yeah,
invested based on past returns, and when markets fell, I did this and I did that, and now I really think that I need to be handheld. So not to say that all advisors are great, but and if your advisor doesn't add value to you, by all means go direct. It's an
correct.
additional cost. You have to derive
Absolutely.
value. But if you
Right.
have a value creating advisor who's a behavioral coach, who's helping you select funds, who's helping you stay ahead of your own behavioral traps, and is reviewing your portfolio, keeping you aligned to your goals, then it makes sense to go through an advisor for best results.
Absolutely. Uh, Anuj, we have a question from Miss Rima, and she says that what if she invests from the NRE account and she wants to repatriate that amount outside India? Is there any charge or tax or restriction?
That's a good question. I will let's get back on this to you offline, Rima. We'll have
Yeah,
someone connect with you on this, on the specifics after understanding your specific situation.
right. Mr. Senthil says, what would you suggest for emergency fund in the current scenario?
Vishaka, what would you suggest?
I would say basically emergency fund is something wherein you would not like to take a very high risk. So obviously the money should be readily available. That is the agenda for setting up an emergency fund. I would suggest go into something which does not have more risk. For example, we have in mutual funds, we have overnight funds or liquid funds wherein you can park your money, wherein there is no lock-in period. And at the same time, you can use this money within a day.
Even arbitrage, although the
Arbitrage
returns haven't
funds,
been very encouraging in the last 12 months, with more
right.
volatility, you may see fairly decent returns. So, mix of arbitrage, liquid, and overnight would serve your purpose very well.
And arbitrage also gives you the tax efficiency. So the taxation
Absolutely.
is as per equity. Yeah. Mr. Jagannath Pradhan says that yesterday we got this news that the mandate for multi-cap reclassification is there, right? Is it a good time for booking profits before the reclassifications comes into effect, or have the amount as such?
I would not take actions based on reclassification. Reclassification is a great step for the broader markets. For around 40,000 crores is going to funnel back into relatively more untouched stocks. So I think it's a fairly good step in terms of broadening the base. But to book profits, I wouldn't do that even if I'm in large caps, because yeah, maybe large caps will take a little bit of a hit, but it's nothing they can't absorb over the long run. In the long run, you'll just see mid and small caps getting more liquidity, and possibly the pricing will improve. So rather than booking profits, I'd maybe do a bit of a realignment. And if I've only been in large caps or blue chips funds till now, I would allocate maybe 30-40% into small and mid caps going forward, and with a long term horizon, and after understanding that they are super volatile.
Correct. We have a question. It says, if I want to go ahead and want to invest via Finich, but there is no person or point of contact in the another city, what to do? So I would say that since like I said, we have clients across 500 cities and 53 countries across globe, and that would not basically be a problem because everything is online. We have our own software, we have our own website, and whatever investments you do, you get the login credentials, and an advisor is allotted to you. The person is a go-to person. The advisor is a go-to person, wherein he or she would be there throughout your investment journey, making sure that he creates a financial plan for you, updates you on a regular basis, is in regular touch with you,
So there's no point of
reviews.
sale restriction because we are
Yeah,
remote. We've got clients all over, and we
right.
serve them wonderfully well. And that's the beauty of our business model, where we have no geographical restrictions. So please feel free to reach out to us at the end of this, and I'm sure you won't be disappointed.
Right. Miss Charu says, if she wants to invest in gold ETF, what period should she look at?
See, gold, like any investment, gold can't be treated as a speculative asset class. And it is,
Right.
there's another question here earlier, which is gold ETF risk free? So
Free.
I'll club
Yes.
that. Certainly not. I have seen gold falling 10, 15, 20% from its highs very, very quickly. For example, if risk aversion disappears from the markets right now and people start betting on things turning bullish, you will see gold falling off a cliff. Sorry. At the same time, if COVID persists and if there is more risk aversion, you may see it going up. So to answer your two questions, one, no, certainly gold is not risk free, and just because it's in the ETF form, it's not risk free. Second, yes, you should look at an asset allocation of at least maybe 10-15% if you would like to, and at least a 3 to 5 year horizon even for gold, because gold has a notorious tendency of going into a shell for many years, and it really tests you, and then all of a sudden it spikes. So you have to have a lot of patience to actually make returns in gold going forward. Do an SIP. That's the best thing. You can't do an SIP in an ETF, but you can purchase systematically, or you can do an investment through an SIP in a gold savings fund.
Correct. And I think it's not good or bad to invest in gold. I think for asset allocation, one can have a small exposure to gold. Yeah. So the next question is from Mr. Umdat. He says, is it a good time to invest in currently low stocks or maybe below the top 100?
Definitely, absolutely. Especially if you've got a long-term horizon. The reclassification is just one small kicker. They are generally very, very undervalued right now compared to their highs, and certainly compared to their blue chip peers. So understand the risks, do an SIP, and definitely it's a great time to invest with a 7-10 year horizon into small and mid caps.
Correct. And the last question is from Mr. Sagar. He says, compounding interest in SIP concept, how it works, and is there any simple example?
I think Vishaka, either you can take it up, or we can take this
Sure.
up offline and show it to you in an
Yes,
Excel sheet if you
excellent.
engage with us at the end.
Right.
We'll actually demonstrate to you how it works over the long run, because we'll need to show you the numbers.
Correct. So I think I have not missed any question in between. I'll just go through it once again. We have answered all the questions, Anirudh.
Absolutely. Wonderful. I think a wonderful session, and I am
Yes.
very, very grateful to all of you. You took time out on a Saturday morning, and I hope you found some of the insights useful, valuable, and things you can take home and actually apply to your financial lives. And we look forward to engaging with some of you over the next few days and weeks. And thank you very much once again.
We have one question, Anirudh, from I think the question was there. I think that it is deleted. So Miss Panchi wanted to say something. So I think she basically 5 years is a time horizon, and she wants to. The risk appetite is high. So any suggestions? So I would suggest that please get in touch with the advisor so that he or she can understand your risk appetite and the goals better. And
We'll have to see
give
it in terms
suggestions.
of a broader
Correct.
portfolio and goals.
Right. Yeah.
Great. Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely weekend ahead.
Yeah. Thank you.